Hey Addicts, welcome back. We're here to talk about The Walking Dead, issue 191, called The Last Stand. And boy, is there a lot of surprise by the end of this issue. We're going to get into that, but first I want to do a recap. We're going to keep the recap short because I want to get into more speculation since, we did get such a big surprise. But with that being said, let's jump right into it. So, we get to see the issue start off and see them right where they were last time, with them in the street of the Commonwealth. Pamela's army on one side, Rick and Maggie's army on the other. And, this gets to like Rick wanting to calm down and talk things through with Pamela. And so that kind of leads into this big speech that Rick does, which I really liked. This is probably one of the favorite things from this arc, especially, dealing with Rick. And it just has a nice, nice references, and just kind of like a retelling of like everything they've been through and kind of their ideals and how they like saw the world. I really like that. There's like the biggest reference I would say is probably one of my favorite Rick speeches of, throughout the entire series, and that is "We Are the Walking Dead" speech. It is changed a little bit here, but that's mainly because, they've gone through a lot since then and Rick's ideals have changed a bit. So the change, it fits, and I actually really do like the kind of point of view they're going for, and it is a nice circling back in terms of like I said, just being a callback. We get to see that the conflict is basically over once Rick gets the speech. He's able to calm down the masses that are behind Pamela and get them to kind of not turn against her, but just stop following her. And, he kind of enlists them to, if you don't like her as a leader, then, elect somebody to replace her. And it is a bit anticlimactic, I will, say. It's one that I don't know, like, in any circumstance that would necessarily work in terms of, like, that they wouldn't just open fire, but I do really like his speech, and, Rick always has really great moving speeches. So, it really does, make sense, I guess, when you reflect on it. But, I will say though, the one thing I did like, that the most that came out of this speech is the shame that Pamela receives, not only by, the crowd basically booing her, but also her getting sent away by Mercer to a cell. It kind of gives you that, to me at least, it kind of felt like a satisfying thing, like Game of Thrones when you see like Cersei walking through the street. I like that. But then we get to see that her son is being a dick like always, and kind of goes with it, but showing his distaste. Everybody's starting to clean up the streets. There is one little thing I want to mention here because I just think it was so. It's just a little thing, but I like the reference, and that is, Mercer's talking how, like, he's never seen people helping out this much before, and he thinks that Rick inspired them, and Rick makes this comment. It's so simple. Where it's like, or scared them, whichever works. And I love that because it's kind of a reference to what Negan has taught him as a leader. Which, speaking of Negan, you get to see Rick having a conversation with Pamela behind a cell, which I think that's funny. That plays out pretty well. I think Pamela definitely still has the potential to be a problem later on, but I think there is hope for her. She doesn't look completely gone. So for that, I'm not really interested in Pamela. There's nothing that we've gotten from her in this story arc that, has me any bit concerned or invested in her. But I will say, after this kind of conversations, depending on how next issue goes, if she, actually is staying around, is alive after next issue or the next two issues, I'll be interested to see what they do with her. But then we get, Rick and Michonne, and like I said, Rick's kind of instilled the community to elect a new leader, and, he's basically saying that, even though the people are kind of like wanting Rick to be the one that steps up and leads them, he's not doing the job because, he's got other obligations elsewhere. And we even see this conversation, or this topic touched later when he has a conversation with Carl, that, it wouldn't make sense, if he just came in and took over. He acknowledges that Pamela would be right in that instance in like calling him out and like what her point was. And so Rick thinks that it should be somebody that lives in the Commonwealth, and I like that too. It's like we don't need that again. We've seen that before, and I'm glad that Rick feels the same way. And I think in his case, it's what he says, it's absolutely right. This little conversation we get with Carl, I don't want to go over like exactly what they go back and forth and say, but all of that transition I do really like. Him talking like the feeling he gets of like being such a good leader, and saying that Carl has it, and he makes mistakes. I just talked about it anyway, but I really did like that interaction. That leads us to basically the end of the issue, which is the surpriser, and that is that we show that Rick is sleeping in the place that people have given him there to stay, and Sebastian just walks right in. They have a little bit of back and forth. Sebastian's got a gun, and in their kind of like, I guess it's not really a conversation because Rick doesn't get to talk a whole lot, but I guess in like Sebastian's whole bitchy spiel, he ends up shooting Rick, and this one looks very fatal. It's not a immediate death. Rick's still alive by the end of the issue, but he's not looking so good, and his words are very faint, as it can clearly tell from the the little speech bubble they get here. But so oh boy, I guess I'll go into like my overall impression of the issue. This is an issue that I really did like. I'll be honest, this is probably the best issue by far in a long time. I think definitely since before Dwight was killed off, this is probably one of the best ones that has come out since then. I would dare say that this one is probably been the most enjoyable for me since before Rick even got to the Commonwealth. So that's saying something. But overall, the ending kind of kills it, for me. Looking at it, I think, and then we'll go into speculation on this, but Rick's death is something that I'm sure is going to happen eventually in some time during the series. It's not something that I want to happen, nor do I think it's ready at this moment, which is probably where a little bit of my distaste comes from. But he's got... There's a good setup if this is the end for Rick. There's a lot of things that I'll kind of touch in my speculation that I think really works as kind of like if this was the end for Rick. But I don't know. I just don't think it's ready. The story is really ready unless Kirkman just got a completely out there idea of where he wants to take the series. But it does damper the issue a little bit. But I think this is, given like Rick's speech and given his like interactions that he has with like Carl in this issue, I think it's definitely worth the pickup, which is something that I'm glad I'm able to say because I haven't been able to say that really for the past however many months. But I don't absolutely love it, but I think this is one I kind of have to wait and see kind of how they end this volume, or I think this might be the end of a compendium or volume at least. So I kind of want to see where they go to really, have like a final verdict of how I feel about it. But I think it's worth picking up. I think you're going to enjoy the stuff that's in it. And it's definitely one that I think is probably the most important one. So if you've been kind of waiting off, or you've been hearing that people are like, oh, it's been kind of shit lately, this might be the one that you kind of jump back in, because there's going to be a lot of stuff possibly popping off here in the next couple issues. With that being said, final verdict, again, go buy it if you're, super diehard fan. If you're kind of just casually, like a casual fan, it's still something you could wait. There wasn't anything explosive that happened because, Rick didn't die in this issue. But I still think that if you were going to hop back into an issue, this might be the one I would suggest. Just because, you get kind of like, an understanding of like what's all happened, which hasn't been much. And you get the finalization of that. You get, nice interaction of the characters. And then this thing that's going to prepare you for the next issue. Because in that way, you're not jumping in and being like, what the fuck? Rick's gone. So, yeah. That being said, that's that. Now getting into speculation. Oh boy. So, I wish I could be really optimistic, but I think Rick's a goner. I think this is it. I think there's just a lot of signs looking back at the issue, looking at where he was shot for one. I mean, he shot like dead center or maybe a little bit off more to the left side of his chest, which, obviously that's, that's where your heart is. That's where everything needs to be pumping through. So if there's a hole in it can't really do that job. So yeah, it's not looking good from that instance. This wouldn't be the first time that, they don't exaggerate people coming back from a wound, but it'd be really hard. They'd have to have some good medical doctors. It's possible, we haven't seen much of like what the Commonwealth has in terms of infirmaries, so it's possible that they could always save him, or maybe like, if somebody wanted to donate anything that Rick needed, possibly. But I think the wound speaks a lot for that. But not only that, I think there's a lot of stuff in the writing that also kind of, if it doesn't happen, I'll be really shocked. But there's a lot of stuff in this issue that is feeling kind of like a send-off to Rick, or at least the beginning of that, with his speech at the beginning. It's really, the speech, at least for me, is a big highlight of showing how Rick has come basically full circle. There might be a little bit of argument here and there that, he hasn't completely, but I don't know. I would say if you're, looking at the, whoa, that pin, sorry about that. If you're looking at the big scope of things, I think, Rick has really come back from a lot of things, and especially like probably his biggest turmoil and, kind of back and forth, or, conflict within himself, and especially acknowledging that they don't have to live like how they used to anymore, and that there is a future to look forward to. It's reading in between the line, it's not looking good from that stance either, because whenever somebody completes their arc, that means they have to go. Which, I mean, you could argue that it's been like that for a while. I memean, maybe before Andrea died, but I think especially after Andrea died, you can kind of see that Rick's arc is, pretty much complete. He's there just for everything else that's going on, and not him specifically as a character individually. But another thing too is, a big part of the issue as well, you get to see Rick and Carl having this, talk, especially in like terms of leadership, and, they have this kind of like passing of the torch type moment where Rick's like, just follow your gut, you have it just like I do. And, sometimes it's wrong, but you just gotta, think it through and stuff like that. I'm butchering that, paraphrasing there, but you know what I'm saying? You can see that, it is kind of like a handoff of like, you can do it too, son. And, if it's gone, it's like, oh, it would be cool to see Carl, step up, but I don't want to let go of Rick yet. But one thing, let's see here. I wrote down a lot of stuff for my speculation. Oh, okay. So, the words that Rick says at the ending, the very last panel, it's something to the effect of, well, here, let me just pop it up so I'm not, paraphrasing badly like I did. Okay. So it says, what did you do? Oh, I thought that was different. Sorry. I thought he said, you didn't know what you did have done. Well, I don't know. I think this is still kind of, plausible. So, judging by like how everything went down, that it was Sebastian that shot him, this might condemn the fates of Sebastian and even Pamela. You could see that Carl, might be by Carl's own hands, or it might be from the Commonwealth, because if the person that was just inspired the community and that everybody's like looking towards as a, the most for a leader is just brutally assassinated by the head bitch's son from days past. I don't think the community is going to react too well, or at least they probably won't look down if anybody else decides to take revenge, like Carl, which I think I definitely would like to see Carl kill them. I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe I think Sebastian's more of a case, but then again, the way they kind of set Pamela up in this issue to kind of have like a redeeming quality, I don't necessarily know if killing her son would make her being redeemed even possible. So yeah, and I don't know if she's killed off. I don't know if I just don't know if killing her off is the right move either. Just because you spend so much time on her and this community. If you just kill her off now, it's like, well, that was kind of bad. But I'm pretty sure everybody agrees that this arc has been kind of terrible. So if something were like that were to happen where it's like, oh, it just made the arc more pointless, well, I mean, so what? It's not like it was that great that wrecking it would be so bad. But yeah, so I think that's one that's kind of left up in the air. But I think it would be cool to see Carl kind of go out for revenge. But I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, nor do I think it's really plausible. It's definitely possible, but and then another thing too is I think that is good to look at is the differences that could happen, whether Rick stays alive or Rick dies. So if Rick stays alive, for the Commonwealth, that could mean that we're going to see, I was going to say Mercer possibly, but he's definitely an option, but I think the more likely candidate is Michonne leading the Commonwealth, and then seeing maybe a possible use of them in a bigger storyline or spreading out to the rest of the continent or the nation. And, for storylines to come with, Rick dying, I think there's a possibility that, they could be, especially be based on the conversation that Rick has with Carl kind of taking up the leadership role and leading the Commonwealth, which I think, I don't know if that's one I really want to see, but I think they could definitely do some interesting stuff with Carl as leader of such a big community. But then again, I still think it's still a high probability that Michonne would become the leader. I think it just makes more sense. And what we might even see, which I don't think Carl would really abandon the people that he's been with for years and kind of grown up around. But I think it is possible that we might see like Rick in the TV show when Lori dies, he just goes completely nutso. And I think it's possible that Carl might go completely nutso if Rick were to die, or at least have some kind of rage, or maybe want to isolate himself to maybe think things through and kind of see what he wants to do. So there might be a possibility that he kind of separates himself and we follow him on the road, maybe. I think, again, I don't really see Carl doing that because of all the people that's around him and the people that would probably want to be near him if Rick were to die. But I think it is something that's definitely in the realm of possibilities. I think something that might be interesting is that I just thought of is maybe Rick is put in a coma, which, hear me out. It's one that I wouldn't necessarily want to happen, but I think that would be maybe more of a believable way that, Rick sustains a heavy blow from this, but is still alive. Or maybe he is, bedridden for a good amount of time where he can't leave the Commonwealth, but he's not fit to, do anything, let alone lead at the moment in his recovery. So maybe then we would see, if Carl wanted to take leadership of the Commonwealth, he could do that and have Rick there to kind of mentor him or, ease him into that, which, hey, that might be a cool way to go. Overall, I think there's, because of this ending and everything that happened in the issue, it definitely opens up the possibilities of what's going to happen in the future. And it's looking a little bit more optimistic now, so I'm really glad for that instance. I will say, though, if Rick does indeed die, I don't know. I might keep with the comics for, until Rick is officially dead. Might check out a couple issues after that, but I just don't know. I don't know if the story could survive, and I don't know if I would stick around for that. But time will tell, and we'll see. We're getting into almost issue 200, so it's very possible Rick is his end is here. But I think there's still a lot of story that could be told with Rick. So I guess we'll just have to wait to see. Issue 192 comes out in June, and then we get to, it's called Aftermath, and this cover is actually really cool. I love the cover for this one. It's Carl sitting in what looks like the Commonwealth streets ridden with walkers, so that's really cool to see, and I don't know. It's not looking good, but it's not looking bright for Rick. Yeah. But let me know what you guys think.